Lucas and his wife, Sarah, had been married for over 15 years. To outsiders, they seemed like the perfect couple. They had 2 children, Liam, 12, and Emma, 9, and lived in a beautiful home in the suburbs. But beneath the surface, Sarah had been harboring a deep and painful secret. Lucas had been having an affair for nearly 2 years with his childhood friend, Rachel. The affair had started innocently enough, just casual meetings for coffee. But soon, it became more than that. Rachel was not only a confidant but someone Lucas turned to when Sarah, who had become increasingly distant, seemed uninterested in their marriage. The emotional connection he developed with Rachel grew stronger, and in time, their secret meetings turned physical. Sarah had suspected something for a while. She noticed subtle changes in Lucas's behavior, his late nights, the occasional distant stare, and unexplained absences. But when you're emotionally attached, confronting your partner is often the hardest thing to do. Sarah didn't want to believe it. She loved him, and the thought of betraying their years of commitment felt unbearable. However, it was Lucas's birthday party that would unwittingly bring everything to a head. As the evening progressed, there was a moment when everyone gathered in the living room to sing happy birthday. That's when Emma, excited to see a photo on Lucas's phone, accidentally opened a message thread with Rachel. The exchange wasn't explicit, but it was enough for Sarah to recognize the emotional intimacy and the undertones of an affair. At first, Sarah was stunned into silence. She didn't want to make a scene in front of the kids, but her heart was racing. Her mind whirled with conflicting thoughts: hurt, anger, and an overwhelming sense of betrayal. She knew she had to confront Lucas, but the party had already spiraled into chaos. Their friends, who had been unaware of the tension, noticed Sarah's sudden withdrawal, and the atmosphere shifted from light-hearted to thick with unspoken tension. The night ended abruptly. Friends and family left, but the damage was done. In the quiet of their home, Sarah demanded an explanation. Lucas, now realizing that his secret was out, was forced to come clean. He admitted to the affair, but he couldn't express how deeply sorry he was or if it could ever be repaired. The revelation tore through the family. Liam, sensing the shift in energy, asked what was wrong. Sarah, breaking down, finally told him that sometimes adults make mistakes, and people they trust can hurt them in ways they never thought possible. Emma, too young to fully understand, clung to Sarah, asking if everything would be okay. But there was no easy answer. As the weeks went by, the family struggled to navigate the complex web of emotions. Sarah felt lost. She wanted to move on but couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal. Lucas, on the other hand, was consumed with guilt and wondered if he could ever regain her trust. Rachel, who had been part of their lives for years, became a ghost. Lucas ended things with her, but the damage had already been done. Family therapy became a lifeline for Sarah and Lucas. It was there that they both began to confront the deep-rooted issues in their marriage: communication problems, emotional neglect, and a lack of intimacy. However, the emotional scars were profound. Lucas tried to prove his commitment, but Sarah's trust had been broken in a way that would take years to rebuild, if it was even possible. As weeks turned into months, the emotional aftermath of the birthday party continued to linger in the family's home. While Sarah and Lucas attended therapy, they both found themselves in a constant state of emotional flux. At times, they would sit in silence, each lost in their thoughts, wondering if the damage was too great to repair. The therapist, though supportive, was honest with them. Rebuilding a marriage after such a betrayal was not only challenging but required both people to be fully committed to the process. Lucas tried to be present, trying hard to demonstrate his remorse and commitment. He apologized countless times, but Sarah, though she wanted to believe him, struggled to accept his words. Every time she looked at him, a part of her couldn't shake the image of his betrayal: those hidden moments with Rachel, the lies, and the years of emotional neglect that had paved the way for the affair. There were nights when she would lie awake, her mind racing, replaying the conversations, the missed clues, the times she had asked herself if something was wrong. There were nights when she wondered if staying was worth the pain. But Sarah wasn't just struggling with Lucas, she was also fighting her own internal conflict. She had to reconcile the woman who still loved her husband with the woman who felt humiliated by him. She had to wrestle with the parts of herself that blamed Lucas for his betrayal, And yet, the larger part of her still mourned the loss of their once deep connection. Their children, too, were affected in ways they didn't understand. Liam had grown quieter since that night, his school grades slipping, his mood shifting. He had always been the sensitive one, and Sarah knew that the crack in their family dynamic had hurt him deeply. Emma, though younger, seemed to sense the tension. She would cling to Sarah more than usual, asking questions about why Mommy and Daddy weren't happy anymore. Sarah found it heart-wrenching to answer, trying her best to protect them both from the weight of the situation, but knowing that children are far more perceptive than adults often realize. The house had lost its warmth, replaced by an air of tension. Even their friends began to notice the subtle changes in their interactions. People who had once admired their seemingly perfect family now found themselves unsure of how to behave around them. Some offered support, while others distanced themselves, uncertain of what to say or do. Rachel, once a frequent guest at family events, had disappeared entirely. She had sent a text to Lucas apologizing for the mess she had caused, but Lucas had deleted it, choosing to sever ties with her completely. In the midst of all this, there were moments of clarity for Sarah. As much as the betrayal had shaken her to her core, she realized that her own feelings were just as important as Lucas's remorse. She had given so much of herself to their family, but in the process, she had neglected her own emotional needs. The affair had been a symptom of something deeper, something that neither of them had addressed for years. And while forgiveness was still a long way off, she began to understand that healing would have to come from within herself, not just from Lucas's attempts to make things right. After several months of therapy, Lucas and Sarah reached a difficult, but necessary, decision. They wouldn't rush to a conclusion about their future. Instead, they would take the time to rediscover who they were, both individually and as a couple. The therapy sessions became less about the affair and more about the emotional distance that had existed between them long before Rachel entered the picture. They began to work on their communication, their emotional needs, and the way they showed affection. It wasn't perfect, but Sarah had made peace with the fact that healing wasn't a linear process. Their marriage was no longer a fairy tale, but it was real. And in that honesty, they found a new beginning, one that was built on the hard truths of their past, the raw vulnerability of their present, and the hope that, with time, they could rebuild a connection that was stronger and more resilient than it had ever been before.